Hello, and thank you for joining me today as I discuss the first book that I have read in 2020. This is part of my 12-book reading list that I have for 2020. I have included in the description below the link to my article and the book list itself. So the book I started with first was Failing Forward by John C. Maxwell. This is really an excellent book. I learned so much from it, and I had to change my attitude towards failure just through reading it. John talks a lot about when he was young, how he had a hard time dealing with failure, and that failure for him was kind of a traumatizing thing, but as he was learning about failure, how he wanted to acknowledge the fact that we don't know how to fail well often, and what it means to fail well, and what that can mean for us personally. And so there was 4 specific things that I learned from this book. The first one was removing the you from failure. So the idea of not looking at failure as it's part of who I am, but instead looking at failure as something that happens, but that doesn't mean that I am not lovable, I am not worthy, or that there is something wrong with me, but that we do fail, and that failure is just part of regular life. The second thing I learned is that the pain of failure can lead to a cycle of fear of failure. And the fear cycle begins with having some fear, which leads to inaction. And if you don't take action, then you don't get an experience in the thing that you fear. And through an experience, you don't gain ability. And when that inability, that makes you feel not confident, so then you have more fear. And so it's this whole cycle of it's almost like the self-fulfilling prophecy where you fear, so you don't do what you need to do, and because you don't know what you need to do, you end up fearing more, and you're not really in a place where you can ever really move past it. And so fear doesn't help us meet our goals. It really does hold us back from what we really want to accomplish. And in that fear cycle can bring feelings of procrastination, of paralysis, and purposelessness. And with all of those things, that doesn't bring us to where we really want to be. And so the key with this is making sure that we move past it. And that doesn't mean we don't fear, but it means that we go into it realizing, yeah, I do fear, but instead of fearing, I am going to do what I need to do. And through that, I am going to find success. And instead of seeing fear as something that is crippling, it's choosing to move past it, even if it's not comfortable. So the third thing that I learned about failing forward was the idea of getting over myself and dying to ego. And dying to ego is something I've spoken about in other articles. It's the idea that our pride and our ego does not necessarily help us move forward. And especially in the idea of failure, ego and pride are telling you that you can't fail, that you are never to admit that you failed, that you would prefer to give up over taking responsibility for failure or having to cover up what has happened to you. Instead, it's choosing that responsibility and saying, yeah, I failed. That doesn't mean I'm an awful person. That doesn't mean that there's something inherently wrong with me. It was a failure. It was just a moment in time where things didn't go quite according to plan. And from that, I think that allows us to really find the humility that when we see other people failing, we have the grace to try to help them along the way. And in turn, that helps us be kinder to ourselves when we fail. And the last thing that I learned about failure was that failure can be a friend. It sounds strange to say failure being a friend. And to be honest, when I first read it, I was like, you've got to be kidding. Failure is supposed to be something that's positive. But in most of these businessmen that have really made it in life, or people who have done things that have been extremely successful, most of them have had like 6 or 7 major failures. You're talking bankruptcy, losing health, all sorts of really serious things. But from it, they chose to persevere. They chose to move on. They chose to learn the lessons from the failure. And instead of that failure conquering them, instead they learned from it. And so failure can be a really excellent thing, because how else are you going to learn if it's not through things not necessarily going according to plan? If everything went well, would we ever learn? And I know for myself, I wouldn't. It's usually through the hardest times that I find I have the most growth. And failure is really important for building resilience, because the things that really matter the most in life are never easy. And if they're never easy, how do we have the resilience to really fight through it to get to the thing that we really want? And a lot of that is learning to overcome failure. I really had to look at how I viewed success and viewed how success dictates how I handle things in my life. And I had to really evaluate, like, what does success look like? And for me, success has always been about the idea of achieving, but not looking at it from achieving of like, well, I got it right, but looking at achieving like I learned something. And that something might have been I learned what not to do. And learning what not to do is almost more important than the success that comes with achieving. Instead, it's realizing that success can be from failure. And it really was about changing the lens I had on success so that I could look at things from a really different lens of being able to give myself the place where I can look at failure as a really positive thing. I hope you have enjoyed this book review on failing forward. Again, this is not all the great ideas in this book. I really suggest that you get your own copy and give it a read. It's been really inspiring for me, and I hope it's inspiring for you this year. If you've enjoyed this video, if you could like it, subscribe to my channel, and perhaps comment below. I hope that you have a really great week, and if you'd like to see this full article on the 4 things that I learned about failing forward, you can visit www.hopalongstudio.com. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.